Finding dog feces slathered across my car's windshield for the third time in a month was the moment I realized my HOA board president had formally initiated hostilities. It is 6 a.m. in Phoenix. I am standing on my own driveway dressed in my boxers and a bathrobe, watching steam rise from my coffee mug and blend with the sickening odor of revenge. For 6 months, this woman had been parking her white Lexus SUV in my driveway, using my property as if it were her own private parking space. What she failed to realize about me, however, is that 2 decades as a civil engineer taught me that every system has a vulnerability, and that includes the power structure she believed shielded her. So, what would you do if a neighbor acted as though they owned your land? Would you involve the police, contact the HOA, or perhaps find a more creative solution? I imagine many people have HOA horror stories that could make my predicament seem like a walk in the park. Allow me to go back and explain how this entire ordeal got started. My name is Mike Chun. I am 52 years old, and 6 months ago, I purchased a modest 3-bedroom home in Sunset Ridge, a Phoenix suburb that seemed ideal on paper. The HOA fees were not excessive. It was located near my teenage daughter, Emma, and following a contentious divorce, I simply needed a tranquil place to start over. The morning stillness in the desert possesses a special quality, punctuated only by the whisper of sprinkler systems and the distant drone of early commuters making their way to work. That peace was maintained for precisely 2 weeks. Sunset Ridge is a classic cookie-cutter development constructed in 1998, with 47 houses occupied by middle-class families and retirees who generally kept to themselves. The president of the HOA board is Patricia Morco. Known to everyone as Patty, she is a 58-year-old real estate agent who has been in charge for 8 years. She took up residence on the corner lot in 2003 and seemingly concluded that this afforded her some form of monarchical standing. The interesting detail about Patty's house is that she has a circular driveway with ample space for 6 cars, yet for some reason, she consistently parked her white Lexus RX 350 on my property. The first time it occurred, I assumed it was a genuine error. I strolled over and rapped on her door. She opened it, clad in a tennis ensemble that likely cost more than my monthly food budget. "Oh, I was just leaving some documents for the Hendersons next door," she explained with a disingenuous smile. "You don't object, do you? It's merely for community business." I should have spoken up at that very moment. I should have insisted she move her vehicle and never park there again. But being a civil engineer, I am not inclined to confrontation. I have faith in systems, processes, and being rational. So, I just reciprocated her smile and replied, "Sure, no problem." It was the greatest mistake of my life. What began as a one-time event soon became twice weekly, then every other day, and eventually a daily occurrence. Her justifications mutated like some sort of ailment, HOA business, an emergency, just for 5 minutes. Every morning when I would emerge to go to work, there it was, that white Lexus obstructing my garage like a territorial claim. Are you familiar with the sound gravel makes when you are compelled to navigate around an object on your own driveway? That grinding sound beneath your shoes as you transport groceries an additional 100 yards because another person has determined your property is theirs. That noise became the score to my escalating frustration. My nature is methodical and patient. I address issues by comprehending systems and discovering equitable resolutions. Patty, conversely, was entitled, manipulative, and had mastered using her position to validate her desires. The difference between us could not have been more pronounced. My neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, a kind 74-year-old who had resided here since the development was built, would observe from her window with a look of sadness. The young couple next door, the Hendersons, began to offer me sympathetic glances but remained silent. Everyone saw what was transpiring. Yet no one wished to antagonize the HOA president. Then I began to pick up on the subtle remarks. When Patty learned I was an engineer, she appeared authentically taken aback. "Oh, you're not in maintenance?" she inquired, her speech slower and louder as if I might not grasp English. She would make comments about neighborhood character and certain types of residents that made my flesh crawl. 3 weeks into this, I was late for work for the 5th time because my car was trapped in the garage. My teenage daughter, Emma, felt mortified to invite friends over due to the constant presence of a strange vehicle in our driveway. The neighbors were observing this slow-motion infringement on my property rights, and I felt utterly powerless to prevent it. But what Patty failed to grasp about engineers is that we are problem solvers. And every problem has a resolution if one is willing to probe deeply enough to uncover it. Week 3 marked the first formal escalation. I returned from work to see a glaring yellow HOA violation notice affixed to my front door. The paper rustled in the desert breeze as I opened it. The violation: unkept yard appearance, holiday decorations out of season. The particular offenses were a small American flag in my garden, which was labeled a non-approved decoration, and a garden hose that was visible from the street. The total potential fines amounted to $450. I just stood there gaping at the notice, feeling my blood pressure surge. It was only 3 days after Memorial Day, and she was classifying my American flag as an unauthorized decoration. So, I did what any proficient engineer would do. I collected data. I traversed the entire neighborhood with my phone, capturing images of identical infractions on other properties. There were garden hoses coiled beside driveways, American flags displayed in front yards, ornamental garden stakes, and potted plants on porches. The Hendersons had the very same flag in their yard. Mrs. Rodriguez had 2 garden hoses in plain view from the street. When I knocked on Mrs. Rodriguez's door to inquire about it, she welcomed me in for coffee and validated my suspicions. "Mijo," she stated, her weathered hands clutching a ceramic mug. "She only issues citations to people she dislikes." My investigation uncovered a pattern that was deeply unsettling. Every homeowner who had received a ticket was either a minority, recently divorced, or someone who had previously clashed with Patty. The violations she had noted on my property were present at a minimum of 15 other residences in the neighborhood, yet only certain individuals seemed to receive notices. Here is a piece of knowledge that was my saving grace. In Arizona, your driveway is considered private property, even if it connects to a public road, meaning unauthorized parking is trespassing. Equipped with this knowledge, I initiated my counteroffensive. I started taking pictures of Patty's car each time she parked on my driveway, employing a timestamp application that logged the precise date, time, and GPS location. I set up a spreadsheet, because engineers adore spreadsheets, to record every incident, noting arrival and departure times, weather conditions, and the duration. In a single week, I had compiled 14 documented infringements. When Patty saw me taking photographs, she marched over to confront me. "Are you threatening me?" she exclaimed, her voice so shrill it made the neighbor's dog begin to bark. "I'm calling the police." I calmly clarified that I was documenting trespassing on my private land. Her face underwent a remarkable color shift from pink to red to purple. Her reaction was immediate and petty. She began parking even nearer to my garage door, at times leaving only inches of space so that I couldn't open it. She would leave her car's engine running with music audible, thus creating noise violations while infringing on my property rights. The woman had elevated passive-aggressive conduct to a fine art. However, a curious thing transpired during this escalation. Mrs. Rodriguez came to my door one evening, holding a manila folder. "I've been documenting her behavior for years," she explained. "You're not the first one she's targeted." The Henderson couple started watching from their window whenever Patty appeared, snapping their own pictures. Other neighbors started to come forward with their own stories. Unauthorized fee hikes, selective enforcement of landscaping regulations, and mysterious infractions that only seemed to affect people Patty had a problem with. The atmosphere in the neighborhood was as heavy as the summer heat coming off the asphalt. You could sense it the moment you went outside. This feeling that everyone was observing, waiting to see the outcome of this power struggle. My own emotional state during this time was interesting to witness, even from my perspective. The initial fury I experienced upon finding her car in my driveway evolved into a more calculated approach. I grasped that this was not merely about parking. It was about power, control, and likely some more profound prejudices I preferred not to dwell on. But as an engineer, I solved problems in a systematic way. I passed my evenings in my garage workshop, sketching designs for automated gates and looking up local laws. I delved into the HOA bylaws and unearthed a fascinating clause regarding member parking privileges that appeared to conflict with everything Patty was doing. The small breakthrough occurred when I located local ordinances concerning driveway access rights. It seemed the city had quite specific regulations about what was considered harassment through parking infringements. Patty may have believed she was untouchable as the HOA president, but she had initiated a conflict with someone who knew their way around municipal codes. As I sat in my garage that Friday evening, amidst legal documents and gate designs, I came to a decision. If Patty wished to play games with my property rights, I was prepared to show her the consequences of provoking someone who designs solutions for a living. Monday morning brought a new height of audacity that, frankly, impressed me with its brazenness. I returned from work to see Patty's Lexus parked so near to my garage door that it was physically impossible to open. The metallic shriek of the garage door motor struggling against the lack of clearance was like fingernails on a chalkboard. She was not in sight. Her car was securely locked, and I was entirely cut off from my own garage. A small group of neighborhood children had assembled to observe me circling my own property like a displaced person, unable to enter my own home. I dialed the non-emergency police number, hoping for assistance. The officer was understanding but clarified the constraints. It's a civil matter, sir. Unless she is obstructing a fire hydrant or breaking a posted rule, there isn't much we can do right away. The towing service needed 24 hours notice and, incredibly, HOA board approval to tow a vehicle from private land within our community. Patty had crafted a flawless trap by using her own power. So there I stood, compelled to park on the street and lug my groceries 100 yards while neighbors observed this mortifying breach of my fundamental property rights. The frustration was consuming me, yet it also activated my research mode. That night, I uncovered something noteworthy about our HOA president. Patty's real estate license mandated adherence to ethical conduct standards, and I located online reviews of her business that showed a history of boundary issues with clients. There were comments like "showed up without notice," disregarded our wishes, and made us feel uneasy in our own residence. Here's a key insight that became vital later. Real estate agents can face license revocation for harassment complaints submitted to the state licensing authority. The lesson is that professional conduct obligations do not vanish simply because an individual holds a volunteer role. However, I required a more prompt fix for the parking issue. That's when I observed my driveway's sprinkler system and experienced what I can only term an engineering insight. I modified the sprinkler head closest to where Patty usually parked, setting its angle to spray that exact location. Then, I reprogrammed the timer for a 6 a.m. daily start, just when she typically showed up for her morning harassment routine. I masked the adjustment with a harmless landscaping task, arranging some decorative rocks around the spot. The sound of pressurized water striking hot metal and concrete at sunrise became my new preferred alarm. It took exactly 3 days for Patty to show up early enough to be caught by my small irrigation change. I was enjoying coffee in my kitchen when I heard her car door shut, followed instantly by a scream that likely roused half the neighborhood. She charged to my front door, soaked and enraged. "This is intentional," she yelled, water still streaming from her tennis clothes. "I'm lodging a complaint with the city." I opened the door with my most guileless look. "Oh no, did you get caught in the sprinklers? I've been having issues with that system. It keeps turning on at strange hours. You should probably park elsewhere until I can have it repaired." The expression on her face was invaluable. Sheer fury blended with the slow understanding that she could not prove deliberate targeting. Her next move was predictably petty and an escalation. She began to park sideways, obstructing my entire driveway. If she couldn't park in her usual spot without getting drenched, she was determined to prevent me from using my driveway at all. This is when I chose to enhance my documentation methods. I installed a motion-activated security camera with night vision, aimed to cover the whole driveway area. The footage it gathered over the following week was utterly captivating. I captured Patty scratching what she believed was my car. It was, in fact, my neighbor's Honda that was parked nearby. I documented her 2 a.m. property inspections, where she searched for violations with a flashlight. Most unsettling was the footage of her rummaging through my trash cans, seeking evidence to use against me. Mrs. Rodriguez contributed her own security footage, which depicted Patty measuring the height of my fence with a tape measure and taking pictures of my garden ornaments from various angles. The woman was conducting surveillance activities that would impress a private detective. But this is where the community's support began to solidify. The Henderson couple finally voiced their concerns after seeing Patty's sideways parking tactic. "She gave us a ticket for having the same flag you do," they revealed. "Same violation notice, same threat of fines. 3 other neighbors came forward with their own accounts of selective enforcement. We established an informal coalition with a group text chat and a shared cloud drive for security footage. Meetings at coffee shops, filled with hushed conversations and manila folders, became our new routine. Meanwhile, I had started to design my ultimate resolution, an automated boom gate system. I investigated the necessary permits for driveway alterations and found a wonderful loophole. Private property changes need no HOA endorsement as long as they adhere to city building regulations. The psychological battle was effective. By pushing Patty to intensify her actions, I was successfully changing this from a private dispute into a community-wide issue. Every neighbor who became annoyed by her spreading harassment was a potential ally in my effort. 2 weeks later, Patty made her most desperate move yet. I was in my garage putting together a new sprinkler timer when I heard police sirens. Through my window, I saw a patrol car stop at my house, and Officer Martinez got out, looking puzzled and a bit irritated. Patty came out of her house as if on cue, practically sprinting over in her tennis whites. "Officer, thank goodness you're here. This man has been threatening me with construction equipment." The crackle of the radio and the creak of leather as Officer Martinez shifted told me all I needed to know about how seriously he took this accusation. He looked at me holding a plastic sprinkler timer, then at Patty, who was gesturing dramatically towards my garage. "Ma'am, what is the exact nature of the threat?" he inquired. I calmly presented him with my documentation folder, photos, timestamps, copies of the relevant HOA bylaws, and printouts of Arizona's trespassing statutes. "Officer, I've been documenting systematic harassment and property violations for over a month. This woman has been trespassing on my driveway daily, despite my repeated requests for her to stop." As Officer Martinez examined my evidence, I could see Patty's confidence dwindling. Her tale of threats with construction equipment appeared quite weak when faced with spreadsheets and legal documents. "Sir," the officer said to me privately after reviewing everything, "you might want to think about filing for a restraining order. This degree of obsessive behavior towards a neighbor could escalate." Here's another piece of knowledge that was vital. Police reports create an official history, even if no charges are filed, which establishes a documented pattern of harassment that courts appreciate seeing later. The lesson: always get incidents officially recorded, even the minor ones. 3 nights later, I found out just how desperate Patty had become. My security camera recorded her at 3 a.m. with a tube of construction adhesive, jamming my driveway gate latch, so I couldn't open it the next morning. The footage was perfectly clear, her face lit up by my motion-activated lights as she damaged my property. But she wasn't finished. The same camera showed her attacking my sprinkler head with a hammer, destroying the mechanism I had spent an hour adjusting. The repair cost me $200, but the evidence was invaluable. My countermove was swift and firm. I ordered a professional boom gate system, $3,200 of solar-powered, smartphone-controlled justice. The specifications were impressive: a 12-foot span, automatic license plate recognition, and a smartphone app that would log every access attempt. The installation was set for the following weekend. I submitted the permits to the city, perfectly legal for private property improvements, and suddenly had a paper trail that proved my modifications were legitimate and authorized. Patty's response was to convene an emergency HOA board meeting, asserting that my aggressive modifications were disrupting neighborhood harmony. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife, given that she had been disrupting neighborhood harmony for months with her parking infringements. Only 2 of the 5 board members bothered to attend. Mrs. Rodriguez was there as my supporter, along with the Henderson couple and 2 other neighbors who had become weary of Patty's selective enforcement tactics. The meeting took place in Patty's living room, a power move that failed spectacularly. She had prepared a slideshow about my violations and threatening behavior, but I countered with my documentation of 47 instances of trespassing and $800 in property damage. The hum of the air conditioning filled the tense silence as the evidence mounted. Board member Janet Walsh, who had been quiet for months, finally spoke. "Patty, this is clearly harassment. We cannot support this behavior." That's when my research into the HOA bylaws paid off significantly. Section 12.3 stipulated that board members are held to a higher standard of conduct and can be removed for violating community covenants. I had found precedent cases where board presidents were removed for this exact type of property harassment. Here is the legal insight that changed the game. HOA board members can be held personally liable for harassment when they use their official role to target individual homeowners. The takeaway is that board authority does not shield you from civil rights violations. I didn't even need to make a threat. I simply read the bylaw aloud and noted that state HOA regulatory boards take these complaints very seriously. The room fell silent. 6 neighbors formally requested Patty's removal from the board the following day. The Henderson couple documented her parking in their driveway as proof of an expanding pattern. Mrs. Rodriguez disclosed a decade of selective enforcement aimed at anyone who challenged Patty. We created a shared Google document to catalog violations and incidents. The evidence was undeniable. This was no longer just about me. It was about a systematic abuse of authority that had persisted for years. My boom gate was set for delivery on Saturday morning. I had arranged for 2 engineer friends to assist with the installation, guaranteeing I would have professional witnesses for the process. The system featured backup power, a manual override for emergencies, and sufficient technological sophistication to ensure any harassment attempt would be automatically recorded. Patty started driving by my house multiple times a day, questioning neighbors about my construction project. She was spiraling, and it was obvious to everyone. Her desperation was clear, and I knew the final showdown was imminent. But before that showdown occurred, I discovered something that altered the entire situation. I was researching property tax assessments for my boom gate permit application when I observed something strange in Patty's corner lot records. According to the county assessor's database, Patty had been paying reduced property taxes for the last 5 years. Her official property lines showed extra square footage that appeared to encompass a portion of my driveway. I obtained the original development blueprints and compared them to the current tax records. A chill went down my spine. Patty had been deceitfully claiming my driveway as part of her property for tax purposes, resulting in savings of approximately $1,400 per year. The woman wasn't just harassing me. She was literally committing fraud against the county by misrepresenting property boundaries. The paper trail was damning. City records indicated that her driveway layout did not match what she had declared to the tax assessors. She had been paying taxes on 0.3 acres when her actual lot size was 0.26 acres, with the discrepancy coming from my property. Mrs. Rodriguez's revelation was the last piece of the puzzle. When I presented her with the tax records, she went into her basement and came back with a 3-ring binder that resembled evidence from a criminal case. "I've been documenting her behavior for years, Mijo," she stated, the musty scent of old papers filling her kitchen. "She did this exact same thing to your predecessor." The binder was filled with photos, dates, witness statements, and property surveys covering a span of 5 years. The previous homeowner, a single mother named Jennifer, had endured identical harassment before selling at a loss after 18 months of HOA persecution. But here is the most shocking part. Patty's real estate agency had represented the buyer when Jennifer sold her house. She had been systematically harassing homeowners to prompt quick sales, then profiting from both sides of the deal. I looked into real estate records and found the pattern was clear. 5 families had moved out in the past 3 years following HOA conflicts with Patty. All of them were minorities, single parents, or recently divorced. 3 of those sales were managed by Patty's agency, bringing in about $180,000 in total commissions. The weight of those documentation folders in Mrs. Rodriguez's basement signified years of methodical abuse. This was not a simple neighbor dispute. This was an organized operation involving tax fraud, housing discrimination, and real estate manipulation. And here is the legal fact that was mind-boggling. Property tax fraud is a felony in most states, with potential fines of $50,000 plus penalties and interest. When you combine that with using HOA authority to discriminate and generate business, you are dealing with federal Fair Housing Act violations. The power balance had completely reversed. I was no longer a defensive victim reacting to petty harassment. I was in possession of evidence of multiple felonies and civil rights violations that could demolish Patty's real estate career and possibly send her to prison. Her aggressive behavior suddenly made complete sense. She wasn't just safeguarding her convenience or asserting her dominance. She was protecting a profitable criminal operation that relied on maintaining fear and control over specific homeowners. The community support now included families with legal grounds for discrimination lawsuits. Mrs. Rodriguez had been documenting not just Patty's actions, but also the demographic trends of her targets. The evidence pointed to coordinated harassment aimed at forcing out certain types of residents. My engineering background was ideal for analyzing and presenting this systematic conduct. I could generate timelines, cross-reference data, and document patterns that would be impossible for Patty to dismiss as mere coincidence. But the most stunning discovery was the extent of the tax fraud. Patty had been claiming parts of 3 different neighbors' properties, not just mine. The total fraudulent area was nearly 1,200 square feet of land she didn't own, but had been paying lower taxes on for years. As I sat in my garage that evening, surrounded by proof of systematic fraud and discrimination, I understood that this case was about more than just my driveway. This was about safeguarding an entire community from a predator who had been using her power to steal, discriminate, and profit from the suffering of others. The boom gate installation was no longer just about preventing parking violations. It was about collecting evidence for what would become the most extensive HOA abuse case our county had ever witnessed. My garage was transformed overnight from a workshop into something resembling an FBI command center. I put up a wall-sized timeline displaying incidents, property records, and HOA meeting minutes. Mrs. Rodriguez became my lead intelligence asset, while the Henderson couple offered technical assistance and vital witness accounts. The legal plan came together when I got in touch with Maria Santos, a civil rights lawyer specializing in housing discrimination. After examining my evidence folders, she leaned back in her chair and let out a soft whistle. "Mike, this is a classic Fair Housing Act violation with a side of tax fraud. I haven't encountered a case this straightforward in 15 years. We formulated a 3-part strategy: a criminal complaint to the county prosecutor, a federal civil rights lawsuit, and a professional misconduct complaint to the state real estate licensing board. Here's the piece of information that made my day. Fair housing violations come with automatic attorney fees for the victims, which meant Patty would have to cover my legal expenses even if we reached a settlement. The boom gate system was delivered on Tuesday morning in a crate that seemed large enough to hold missile components. Commercial-grade equipment intended for parking garages, featuring vehicle detection sensors and smartphone connectivity. My 2 engineer friends, Dave and Rick, offered to help with the installation, partly because they wanted to see justice prevail, but mostly because they were intrigued by the technical details. Community coalition building ramped up as 7 neighbors signed formal complaints against Patty. Mrs. Rodriguez arranged coffee gatherings that were actually strategy meetings, complete with shared manila folders and hushed discussions. The scope of the harassment was immense. It went far beyond parking infringements to include noise complaints about children playing, architectural violations for holiday decorations, and landscaping rules that appeared designed to bankrupt homeowners. I built a digital database, cross-referencing photos, videos, timestamps, and witness statements with property records and HOA meeting minutes. The financial review showed Patty's tax fraud amounted to over $7,000 in unpaid taxes, while the analysis of real estate transactions revealed $180,000 in commissions from the forced sales of targeted families. Our surveillance network was impressive enough to make the NSA envious. Coordinated security camera coverage from several neighbors streamed into a shared cloud storage, while our group text message chain provided real-time incident updates. My phone buzzed constantly with new evidence, a continuous stream of documentation of a harassment campaign that had operated undetected for years. The preparation of the professional complaint was particularly gratifying. Real estate licensing boards take ethics violations very seriously, and I had proof of discrimination, harassment, fraud, and using a professional position for personal advantage. The timeline showed a clear pattern of violating every ethical standard in the real estate field. The media approach was critical. I found a consumer protection reporter at Channel 12 who had previously covered HOA abuse stories. The evidence package I put together was strong enough for investigative journalism, but I wanted Patty's actions to speak for themselves rather than for me to appear vengeful. The logistics for installation day required military-like precision. The Saturday morning installation was scheduled with permits displayed prominently for legal compliance. Neighbors were invited to attend as community witnesses, and I intended to video record the entire event for evidence. I practiced calm responses to anticipated confrontations with Dave and Rick. Role-playing helped me stay focused on facts, documentation, and legal adherence rather than getting pulled into emotional disputes. My aim was to maintain the moral high ground no matter how Patty reacted. The technical specifications were beautifully simple. The boom gate had a 12-foot span with a 6-second raise/lower cycle, powered by solar panels with a battery backup. The smartphone app control included access logging, and pressure sensors prevented vehicle damage during operation. Contingency planning addressed every scenario I could think of. Police contact information was saved on my phone. My attorney was on call for emergency advice, and I had arranged other parking for Emma's weekend visits. Documentation plans were in place for any sabotage attempts. The final step was reviewing all the evidence one last time, verifying the legal compliance of every planned action, and coordinating with neighbors for support on installation day. The air in the garage was thick with anticipation and the smell of machine oil, the scent of justice being carefully engineered. But the most crucial preparation was psychological. I had spent months being reactive, countering Patty's harassment with increasingly sophisticated defenses. Now, I was going on the offensive, implementing a solution that would permanently fix the parking issue while collecting evidence for the larger legal battle. The boom gate symbolized more than just access control. It was a testament to property rights, engineering skill, and a refusal to be intimidated by petty authority. Every neighbor who had been harassed, every family forced to move, every homeowner targeted for selective enforcement was depending on this moment. Saturday morning could not arrive soon enough. The burden of community expectations, combined with my own thirst for justice, created an atmosphere of barely suppressed excitement. Mrs. Rodriguez had promised to bring homemade cookies for the installation team. The Henderson couple planned to film everything. Even my daughter Emma was eager to see her dad finally stand up to the woman who had made our lives a misery for months. "Dad," she had said, "you're going to show that lady what happens when you mess with an engineer." And that is exactly what I intended to do. On Friday night before the installation, my security cameras recorded something that infuriated me. At 2:47 a.m., Patty was creeping across my driveway with bolt cutters, trying to damage the boom gate parts one had stored under a tarp. The motion-activated lights perfectly illuminated her face as she wrestled with the heavy-duty construction materials. She was unsuccessful, of course. I had fastened everything with hardened steel cables, and she ran off when Mrs. Rodriguez's ancient chihuahua began barking loud enough to rouse the dead. The footage was irrefutable evidence of attempted sabotage and destruction of property. Saturday morning brought installation day drama that surpassed even my predictions. At 8 a.m. on the dot, Dave and Rick showed up with their tools, only to find Patty's Lexus obstructing my driveway. She came out of her house as if on cue, dressed in what appeared to be her most authoritative clothing. "I have the right to inspect this construction for HOA compliance," she declared, placing herself between my team and the installation area. "This is a violation of community standards, and I am shutting it down." I immediately called the police. Officer Martinez was there within 10 minutes, looking as though he'd rather be anywhere else. "Ma'am, you need to move your vehicle. This is private property, and the gentleman has the proper permits." Patty's face went through that remarkable color progression once again as the officer instructed her to move her car and cautioned her about any further interference. It was the sweet sound of justice being served at 8:30 in the morning. But she wasn't finished. An hour later, she came back with a city inspector who was apparently a friend from her tennis club and owed her a favor. This move backfired spectacularly when the inspector confirmed that all the permits were in order and the construction was legally compliant. When Patty insisted on property line measurements, the surveyor she had summoned verified that the boom gate was entirely on my land. By 2 p.m., the installation was finished. The initial test was completely gratifying. The gate operated perfectly, with a mechanical hum that sounded like victory. I showed the smartphone app to the assembled neighbors, demonstrating how every access attempt would be automatically logged with a timestamp and photo. Patty's immediate countermove was predictably desperate. At 3 p.m., she tried to park in my driveway as if nothing had changed. The boom gate's vehicle sensors activated an automatic closure, blocking her access while her car sat there like a bewildered metal animal. She hammered on my door, demanding the immediate removal of this illegal structure. I calmly informed her through the door intercom that private property rights take precedence over HOA preferences, all while video cameras documented her increasingly erratic actions. Her threats of lawsuits and city violations seemed empty when faced with proper permits and legal compliance. The escalation of her desperation was fascinating to observe. She contacted city compliance, the fire department, and the planning commission, asserting that the gate posed public safety risks. Each inspection confirmed the system was legal, correctly installed, and had the necessary emergency access features. Here's a piece of knowledge that saved me a lot of trouble. Emergency access rules do not apply to private driveways, only to public roads and commercial properties. The lesson: understand your local codes before critics start making false claims about safety violations. The community's response was overwhelmingly supportive. Neighbors came to watch the gate in action, applauding when it successfully blocked unauthorized entry. The Henderson couple asked for installation referrals for their own driveway. Mrs. Rodriguez brought homemade cookies to celebrate what she termed justice finally being served. Patty's harassment campaign broadened beyond parking. She started honking her horn outside my house at 6 a.m. every day, left threatening notes on neighbors' cars, and called my workplace claiming I had violated construction codes. She lodged nuisance complaints with 3 different city departments, all of which were dismissed after investigation. The documentation trap was functioning flawlessly. Every interaction was automatically recorded by the gate system, with the smartphone app's data logging all access attempts and timestamps. The video integration captured Patty's increasingly erratic behavior, creating legal evidence that gathered automatically. My strategic response was beautifully straightforward: maintain calm documentation while allowing Patty to undermine her own credibility through her escalating desperation. I provided evidence to my attorney for the harassment case and worked with neighbors to document her expanding pattern of retaliation. The setup for the breaking point was clear to everyone watching. Patty's behavior grew more public and erratic as neighbors started to avoid her and refused to back her complaints. HOA board members began to distance themselves from her actions, understanding the liability risks of supporting systematic harassment. For one blissful week, the boom gate operated perfectly, with no unauthorized parking incidents. My stress levels decreased significantly. Emma could visit without parking issues, and I could get to my own garage without navigating an obstacle course. The technical success was matched by a psychological triumph. Patty's power and control had been completely neutralized by superior engineering. But I knew this was merely the calm before the storm. Desperate people take desperate measures, and Patty was about to demonstrate just how far she would go to uphold her reign of neighborhood terror. The final confrontation was gathering like a summer thunderstorm in the desert. You could feel the electricity in the air, waiting for the lightning to strike. The lightning struck on a Tuesday morning when Patty appeared at my door with an envelope containing $2,000. I recorded the entire exchange on my smartphone app as she stood there, perspiring in the desert heat, attempting to buy her way out of the predicament she had created. "Look, Mike, let's settle this dispute privately," she said, her voice trembling as she offered the envelope. "This gate is an embarrassment to the whole neighborhood. People are talking." I gazed at the cash, realizing I was witnessing the final act of a woman whose power was built on intimidation and who was now reduced to attempting bribery. "Patty, are you offering me money to take down legal improvements on my own property?" "It's not a bribe," she stammered. "It's compensation for your trouble." The irony was exquisite. Here was a person who had been defrauding the county through tax fraud, now trying to fix her problems by throwing cash at them. I courteously refused her offer and recommended she seek legal advice about her mounting legal issues. That bribery attempt led me to investigate the HOA's finances, and what I discovered made the property tax fraud seem like a minor offense. Over 2 years, there were $23,000 in unexplained costs listed as landscape maintenance and community improvements that no one could account for. The paper trail pointed directly to Patty's husband's landscaping company, which had been awarded every single contract without any competitive bidding. Here's a piece of information that astonished me. HOA board self-dealing is illegal in most states and can lead to personal liability for all fraudulent transactions. The lesson: Board members cannot use their positions to direct funds to family businesses. Patty's reaction to my refusal was a full-blown smear campaign that would have impressed a political strategist. She set up fake social media profiles to malign my character, posting deceptive pictures of my property with provocative captions like neighborhood eyesore and dangerous modifications. The rumors she circulated were cruel and personal, lies about my divorce, my finances, and even my relationship with my daughter. She contacted my engineering firm with false accusations of unprofessional behavior and workplace violations. But I had learned how to track digital trails, and my counterintelligence work showed the fake accounts came from devices on Patty's home network. My attorney confirmed that claims of cyberstalking and defamation were valid, adding another layer to our expanding legal case. Her desperation peaked when she tried to mobilize the city council against what she termed the dangerous precedent of permitting boom gates in residential neighborhoods. She argued that my installation would ruin the neighborhood's character and organized a petition with what were later found to be forged signatures. The city council meeting was a catastrophe for Patty. Council members had already examined my permits, inspected the installation, and determined everything was legally sound. Her petition collapsed when a handwriting analysis showed multiple signatures in the same handwriting. That's when the situation turned physical. On Thursday evening, I was in my garage when my security system alarm went off. On the camera feed, I saw Patty approaching my boom gate with a baseball bat, yelling threats about personally taking down this eyesore. The neighbors called the police as she stood there, in full view of several cameras, threatening to demolish my property with a weapon. The metallic sound of handcuffs 20 minutes later was the most satisfying thing I had heard in months. The arrest report detailed Patty's escalating pattern of harassment, and I finally obtained the restraining order I should have sought weeks before. The HOA board convened an emergency meeting to discuss her immediate ousting, understanding the liability nightmare of retaining an arrested board president. Local news covered the story. HOA president arrested for harassment. Channel 12's consumer protection reporter interviewed me and several neighbors, presenting it as a story of a homeowner fighting back against HOA abuse. The video of my boom gate in action went viral on social media, with thousands of shares and comments supporting my engineering solution. National HOA reform advocates reached out to me for my testimony on systematic abuse patterns. My case was being used as evidence for legislative reform, which felt surreal but deeply gratifying. The community's transformation was extraordinary. 6 homeowners asked for boom gate installation referrals, tired of dealing with parking violations and property harassment. We established a neighborhood watch program focused on monitoring HOA compliance and preventing future abuse. Property values actually went up due to fewer harassment issues and better community management. The petition to permanently oust Patty from the board received signatures from 34 out of 47 households. A financial reckoning occurred when we engaged a forensic accountant to examine all HOA finances. The additional fraud discoveries were astounding. Phantom maintenance costs, inflated vendor payments, and mysterious emergency repairs that never occurred. The total fraud was estimated at over $35,000 over 3 years. The legal momentum was growing like an avalanche. A civil rights lawsuit was filed with extensive evidence. The Real Estate License Board scheduled disciplinary hearings, and criminal charges were pending for fraud and harassment. My attorney was sure of significant monetary damages and professional repercussions. But the true victory was technical vindication. My boom gate performed flawlessly through all the turmoil, with no mechanical failures despite attempts at sabotage. The smartphone app provided essential evidence for legal proceedings, and the engineering solution proved to be both a practical and evidentiary triumph. Patty's complete isolation was almost pitiable to witness. Her husband filed for divorce, citing legal risks. Real estate clients terminated contracts because of the negative publicity, and even her tennis club quietly ended her membership. The stage was set for our final public showdown. The Phoenix Community Center had never witnessed such an event. Over 200 residents filled the main hall for what was meant to be a standard town hall meeting on HOA governance issues. Local TV news crews set up for full coverage, while city council members and HOA regulatory officials sat at the front, looking as though they would rather be anywhere else. The air conditioning fought against the heat of the crowd and the nervous energy that permeated the room like electricity before a storm. You could smell the tension blended with coffee and the faint desert dust that finds its way into every Phoenix building. Patty showed up with a new lawyer, despite the restraining order that required her to keep her distance from me. She appeared worn out, her usual tennis attire swapped for a conservative suit that failed to conceal the desperation in her eyes. Her effort to portray herself as the victim of a malicious neighbor was unsuccessful when she faced a room full of people she had harassed for years. "Ladies and gentlemen," she started, her voice trembling, "we are here because one resident has decided that community standards do not apply to him. This boom gate violates everything our neighborhood stands for." The hostile muttering from the audience told me everything I needed to know about how this would unfold. When it was my turn, I went to the podium with my laptop and a folder thick enough to stop a door. My presentation was calm, systematic, and crushing. The digital slideshow featured photos, videos, financial records, and a timeline that depicted years of systematic harassment. "Here is what actually happened," I stated, advancing to the first slide showing Patty's car in my driveway. "Patricia Morco has trespassed on my property 127 times over 6 months. She has committed tax fraud by claiming my driveway as part of her property, and she has used her HOA position to discriminate against families she wanted to drive out of the neighborhood." The flood of evidence was a sight to behold. Property tax fraud documents presented to city officials, real estate license violations detailed with specific instances, and Fair Housing Act violations explained with legal precedents. When I reached the financial fraud, $35,000 in missing HOA funds, the room erupted in angry murmurs. Mrs. Rodriguez then took the microphone, presenting her 3 years of harassment documentation with the grace of someone who had awaited justice for decades. "This woman has terrorized our neighborhood for too long," she declared, her voice heavy with the weight of years of systematic abuse. The Henderson couple detailed the intimidation and selective enforcement. 5 other families described systematic discrimination that had made them contemplate moving. The pattern of abuse spanning a decade became undeniable as each story reinforced the last. That's when Channel 12's consumer protection reporter stepped up with the question that blew the case wide open. "Miss Morco, how do you respond to allegations that you've been filing false property tax claims and using your HOA position to generate real estate commissions?" Patty's reaction was a spectacular and complete meltdown. She stood up, pointed at the camera, and yelled, "This is harassment. You people are destroying an innocent woman." She then charged towards the exit, shoving the camera operator so hard that he stumbled. The dramatic footage of an HOA president physically assaulting the media while escaping public scrutiny was destined to be the top story on the 11 o'clock news. I stayed calm throughout her outburst, answering every question professionally and sticking to the documented facts. The contrast between her hysteria and my composed responses was so clear it made the point without me needing to say anything. Official actions were swift and decisive. The city attorney confirmed a criminal investigation was underway. The HOA Regulatory Board announced a formal compliance review. The Real Estate License Board scheduled an immediate disciplinary hearing. The county assessor launched a property tax fraud investigation. But the most impactful moment came when I revealed my boom gate's final secret. The system has recorded 127 unauthorized access attempts with full video documentation, I said, displaying the smartphone app data. Every single interaction is logged with timestamps, photos, and GPS coordinates, including the audio recording of Ms. Morco attempting to bribe me with $2,000 in cash. The collective gasp from the crowd was audible as the full extent of the corruption became apparent. Camera flashes created a strobe effect during my testimony, while the nervous rustling of paper came from Patty's attorney's table as he assessed his unwinnable case. Legal vindication was immediate. My attorney announced the successful filing of a civil rights lawsuit seeking $250,000 plus attorney fees and punitive damages for willful discrimination. This was set to become a landmark case for victims of HOA abuse nationwide. The community's transformation was instant and profound. The HOA board unanimously voted to introduce transparency rules, financial oversight committees, and anti-discrimination policies with genuine enforcement measures. By acclamation, without even a formal vote, they elected me to the board. Media coverage surpassed our wildest dreams. The story led local news with headlines like "Engineers Boomgate Halts HOA Abuse," while social media turned my Boomgate into a symbol of homeowner empowerment against petty despots. When I showed the gate's operation for news cameras, explaining the technical specifications and legal compliance, the crowd erupted in spontaneous applause. Children cheered as the boom gate moved on command, its satisfying mechanical hum signifying victory over months of systematic harassment. Mrs. Rodriguez presented me with a community service award as cameras filmed and neighbors queued up to thank me. The moment felt surreal. 6 months ago, I was a recently divorced engineer just wanting to park in my own driveway. Now, I was unintentionally at the forefront of a homeowner rights movement. 6 months later, the change is nothing short of incredible. Patty's house sold within a week of the town hall meeting. It seems fleeing Phoenix was simpler than facing the repercussions of years of systematic harassment. My property value rose by 15% due to the improved neighborhood stability, and that boom gate has become a bit of a tourist spot for engineers and HOA reform advocates. The legal outcome surpassed even my attorney's predictions. The civil rights lawsuit was settled for $180,000 plus attorney fees, while criminal charges led to probation and a restitution order that will have Patty paying for her crimes for years. Her real estate license was permanently taken away, putting an end to a career founded on discrimination and fraud. The HOA financial audit recovered $28,000 in fraudulent spending, money that was returned directly to homeowners through fee reductions. Our new board has put in place resident-friendly policies, monthly transparency meetings, and financial oversight that is genuinely effective. Property values throughout the development have increased by 8% due to better governance and community reputation. The personal recovery was as significant as the legal win. Emma proudly tells her friends about her dad's engineering victory, and our bond strengthened through this entire experience. My confidence, which had been shaken by a difficult divorce, was restored by proving I could stand up to injustice and succeed. The legacy of the boom gate has grown beyond anything I could have foreseen. Popular Mechanics highlighted it as a DIY home security solution, and I have shared the design plans freely with harassment victims across the nation. 3 manufacturers have approached me about commercial licensing, though I am more driven by helping people than by making a profit. But the true victory is the social benefit that emerged from this struggle. I donated the entire lawsuit settlement to create the Fair Housing Defense Fund, which offers legal aid to low-income homeowners dealing with HOA abuse. We have already assisted 12 families in fighting back against systematic harassment, and the fund collaborates with civil rights organizations on broader reform initiatives. The engineering scholarship program we created supports students focusing on housing issues and community planning. It's remarkable how the fight for your own driveway can lead to supporting the next generation of individuals who will design better communities. As for Patty's fate, she relocated to another state to escape the local notoriety. The divorce was finalized with a significant loss of assets, and the restraining order is still in place. She is now used as a cautionary tale in HOA management training programs. Apparently, How Not to Be Patricia Morco is an actual course title. Today, my boom gate operates perfectly after 8 months, with 0 unauthorized parking incidents and 0 mechanical failures. The smartphone app has been updated with community features that assist neighbors in coordinating security and documenting any future issues. The system has paid for itself through the prevention of property damage and its value as legal evidence. The neighborhood's transformation continues to astound me. Crime has decreased by 40% due to enhanced community vigilance and cooperation. New residents are drawn by our reputation for fairness and effective governance. Our annual community festival now celebrates unity instead of division, with the proceeds supporting local housing advocacy. Follow-up media stories monitor our progress, and my case is referenced in state legislative hearings on HOA reform. The National HOA Reform Bill, currently before Congress, actually points to our situation as evidence for why systematic oversight is necessary. My personal life has blossomed in ways I never anticipated. I am now dating Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter, Carmen, a divorced teacher who values men who stand up to bullies. My relationship with Emma is stronger than ever, and I have formed friendships throughout the community that go far beyond property disputes. The wider impact continues to grow. 12 similar harassment cases have used our precedent in their legal arguments. HOA management companies now offer anti-discrimination training specifically because of cases like ours. Property management software now includes harassment documentation features inspired by our methods of evidence collection. Every morning, I savor my coffee in quiet tranquility, listening to the sounds of the desert sunrise instead of arguments about parking. My garage door opens without any obstruction for the 247th day in a row. The satisfying click of my smartphone app, showing 0 unauthorized access attempts, never ceases to please. But the greatest achievement is what we have created together as a community. We have demonstrated that ordinary individuals can resist petty tyrants and triumph, that engineering problems have engineering solutions, and that defending your rights can motivate others to do the same. So, I leave you with this thought. What is your own HOA nightmare story? I am certain you are not alone in this struggle. What might you have done differently in my position? And if this account has inspired you to confront your own neighborhood bully, I would be interested to hear about it. Sometimes, the best revenge is indeed living well and maintaining exceptionally good documentation.